Now, I know this isn't the sleek red sports car project that my subscribers want to see me working on, but the timing of this NSX project couldn't be any better as I continue to save my pennies for the Coyote swapped Ferrari. A few years ago, I managed to talk my friend Josh into finally repairing this wrecked NSX after it had been sitting for more than a decade. We knew that if the time arose that he would ever want more power out of this thing, that we were going to have to take it to an absolute another level, and that means I need a donor car.
No fucking way.
So if you look just past my finger there, there's a tag from a company down in Florida called Gear Driven Inc., who just so happens to be the company that I've been talking to about rebuilding the transmission for this NSX project. Now, unfortunately, I already sent a picture of the tag to Dale, and this one is number 252 out of something like 1,400 transmissions that he's rebuilt to date. He said as far as time frame goes, he probably rebuilt this something like 8 years ago. So we didn't get super lucky. Like the second I saw that tag, I thought, oh my goodness, we just hit a home run with this car. But the fact that he's been through this leaves me optimistic that it's probably, maybe, in okay shape. Also extremely important is the fact that the block is stamped K20A2, which means that this is the block that we've been looking for. And I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but I was able to verify that the head is indeed the correct head as well, which means this car is exactly what we needed from the auction. I'm not seeing anything too alarming otherwise from this accident. Really, our only concern is the fact that the throttle position sensor is broken. I don't know if it's going to start without that. We're definitely not going to have any throttle control, but it's time to find out. That doesn't sound good at all. Go ahead. Huh. Okay.
No bueno. This timing set is not timing properly.
Now, while we focus on prepping the NSX chassis here at the shop, I sent the K-Series engine down to Ramey Racing for a refresh. And when I say refresh, I mean an 1,100 horsepower built bottom end and their 750 horsepower head package, which consists of the factory casting and factory cams with upgraded valve train to handle the RPM we're going to throw at it. In that time, Dale down at Gear Driven Inc. also got our transmission completely refreshed and upgraded so it'll be able to handle up to 800 horsepower. The foundation of our fuel system is the fuel pumps, and thanks to Radium Engineering, all the hard work is already figured out for us. This is a drop-in dual pump setup designed specifically for the NSX that's going to allow us to run the largest E85 pumps that still have check valves in them. Because we want to run these fuel pumps staged, that is a very important feature. Ask Tim how he knows.
Oh, it just becomes a nightmare if you don't have those things in there.
We fought that battle on the 2JZ Hellcat, and it left a mark for sure. The hanger does have to install in 2 pieces because of the small opening in the NSX tank, but once it's all installed, we're going to have a -8 feed line and a -6 return line, which should supply all the fuel that we need to make somewhere in the 800 horsepower range.
I think you installed this one first.
Did you read the directions?
No. Who does that? Kick to the side, and then somehow that gets in there. Oh no. There.
Professional.
That's tight fit.
I put together a table full of the absolute best performance parts that the industry has to offer for this application, and now that our fuel tank is reinstalled, it's time to put some of these to good use.
Okay, that wasn't bad.
Nailed it.
Not too shabby.
Now, one thing that you may have just noticed is that we went ahead and made the change to the K24A2 block for really no reason at all. I still have that K20 over there stashed away for a later project, but I had the opportunity to pick up a TSX for a good price. Don't mind the check engine light, it's just because somebody cut off the catalytic converter.
You want to know why we switched? Because there's no replacement for displacement.
Facts. Lucky for us, this is a swap that already has engine mounts available on the market, which saves us the time and complexity of having to fabricate mounts and locate this engine in the engine bay. Everything dropped right into place, which means that we get to go right to bolting on the go-fast parts. The first thing to swap over is the new oil pan. The replacement pan is internally baffled and already has a bung for our turbo drain line. For the turbo, I worked with the guys from Artec Performance to spec a Garrett G4900 using one of Artec's 0.8 AR back housings. The only question is, where are we going to mount it? Because our engine's in the same configuration as, say, a front-wheel drive RSX, just in the back of the car, we had two off-the-shelf stainless steel manifolds available to us from Artec. This is the Sidewinder manifold, which puts the turbo on the driver's side of the engine in a much more aesthetically pleasing location, and then the slightly more conservative standard behind the engine location, neither of which we know actually fits in this chassis yet. We're going to start with the Sidewinder manifold because, let's face it, it will look a whole lot cooler if the turbo is on this side of the engine, but we've got more stuff to run into over here, and we're already hitting. We aren't anywhere close to being mounted right now, and it's obvious it's going to put the turbo way too high into the chassis and way too close to this trunk firewall. Much smaller, much more compact. Oh, we're there. Much better. But I still have concerns. As we look from underneath, there's plenty of room for a wastegate. There'd be ample space for a downpipe. The only problem that I see is that the compressor housing of the turbo, the largest part, is going to sit right over here by that bump out in the firewall coming from the trunk. Sometimes it's harder to describe and even more difficult to show on camera what I'm trying to explain to you guys, but hopefully this illustrates the point. Obviously, it's not even facing the right orientation, but you can see this is not a small turbo, and trying to stuff it back there is just not going to work. So we're going to go with manifold option B, but we're going to have to try and figure out how to use turbo placement A, which means we need to bust out the welder. Yep. So now we've got the turbo placed exactly in the engine bay where we want it, and while Tim was welding up stainless steel, he went on a tear, finished the entire exhaust for this NSX, which we'll show a little bit more of later in the video. But for now, we need to turn our attention to the cold side of this turbo system and figure out where we're going to be placing our intercooler. I used one of these off-the-shelf Mishimoto water-to-air intercoolers on my rotary RX-7 project, and I absolutely loved it. I knew that I was going to want to run one for the NSX. The only question is exactly exactly what the configuration is going to be. Mishimoto offers these in 3 different sizes with 3 different horsepower ratings, as well as the option to configure the intercooler exactly how you want it. This one has the inlet and the outlet facing opposite directions, where the ones that I've chosen to run in the past face the same direction. Essentially, the air comes in and makes a U-turn, passing through the intercooler brick, which also happens to be a dual pass for maximum cooling. I think you guys are smart enough to figure out that the one with the fittings in it is the one that we're going to be using, and Tim and I came up with a pretty good mounting position where we're going to put it. Directly on top of our billet intake manifold. Switching to a 4-cylinder engine, you'd think there'd be all the space in the world, but the truth is when we start putting more and more into this engine bay, we're running out of real estate rather quickly. Now, the one spot that we do have space is to go vertical. Because of the shape of the rear hatch glass, there's ample space above the engine. Really, the only concern that we had was making sure that the engine vibrations didn't transmit to the intercooler, and we took care of that with some large rubber isolators. We've got our turbo in place, we've got our intercooler in place, now we just need to connect the dots. Now, before we can put this in place, we do have to switch gears yet again and do some cutting on something not related to the turbo system. This is the factory transmission shifter counterweight, and we're not just removing it because we want to save like 2 pounds. Because our shifter cables come from the front now instead of from the rear, we need to get it out of the way so that the shifter can operate properly. Now, fortunately, Hybrid Racing makes a bracket for the shifter cables already that has all the correct geometries figured out. Now all we'll need to do is get a length for our cables, and then once this thing's running, we'll be able to shift properly. So believe it or not, one of the most difficult parts of this swap that I found through my research is the shifter assembly. I went ahead and got the NSX shifter out of the car and attached to the bench, as well as our replacement K-Series shifter from Hybrid Racing so that we can illustrate the issue. The mid-engine NSX transmission is controlled very similarly to a front-wheel drive K20 transmission, like pretty much all the other front-wheel drive transmissions out there, via a set of these shifter cables which are specifically measured to control the transmission linkage appropriately. Each one of those shifter cables attaches to each one of these levers, and each gear in the transmission has a specific location that the shifter selects. So to get from neutral to first gear, both levers go forward, but then if we want to go to second gear, the one lever on the right stays forward and the one on the back goes backwards. On the NSX shifter though, if we move from neutral to first gear, everything comes backwards, and then second gear, it actually goes forward, which is the complete inverse function of the K-Series shifter. So easy enough, we've got the right shifter now from Hybrid Racing that will control our K20 transmission. The problem is that we have to make this shifter assembly along with the cable mounts work in the same area as the NSX e-brake. And after all of our cutting, this is what we are left with. We're going to still need to make a base plate for the shifter to attach to the floor, which the way I have it laid out, it's going to be able to be a bolt-in option. Now, I had to completely hack up that aluminum cast e-brake mount, which means that we're going to have to incorporate into our shifter assembly a mount for the e-brake handle, which from a strength perspective, I think at the end will make a whole lot more sense, but we've still got more cutting to do. So now we've got what's left of our cut down hybrid racing shifter mount welded to our big steel base plate. And this is going to be the position where the shifter is going to sit. Obviously, nothing has changed on the geometry for the ends of the cables and where they mount. And then I think I have just enough space to route the actual cables down through the tunnel and out into the chassis where they will go to meet the transmission. Now with the shifter panel installed, you can see that everything lines up exactly how it should. And originally I was worried about getting this shifter back and centered into this opening as much as possible until I realized that's not how Acura did it from the factory. I'm assuming that Acura used the exact same shifter panel for the manuals and the automatics, which would need a lot more space here for the shift selector with the park, reverse, neutral, drive setup. On the manuals, they actually have a dummy piece here at the back that amounts to about 1.5 inches worth of space. So our modified hybrid racing K-series shifter actually sits in the exact same spot that the OEM shifter did previously. So I think that everything's figured out with the shifter mechanism mount on it. The only thing that's left to do is try to secure some of the OEM cables to this and get a length for our custom cables that Hybrid Racing is going to make for us. These NSX shifter cables are unfortunately too short, which is part of the reason why they have to be replaced, but I wanted to use them as part of the measuring process. That way I know exactly how much resistance I have and how kind of tight of a bend I can make it conform to. And when I did that, I got a rough measurement of these two combined, which is 68.5. The only problem is that these pieces here that I was using to measure from slide in and out. You can see that as I pull this end, that end shortens. So I don't know that the measurement that I got here was exactly the right number. So then I went ahead and switched to a piece of fuel hose, had Eric sit in the car and hold it in place, and I came out with a measurement of 67 inches, which is pretty close to the rough measurement that I got using the shifter cables at 68.5. So I think that 67 inches is a pretty safe number to go with. With a few additional finishing touches and the mounting of some other important components, the top side of our engine bay is rapidly nearing completion, which makes it the perfect time to jump underneath and show you the rest of our water-to-air intercooler system. Our lines run from the back of the car underneath our factory aero panel up to the front where our pump is located. The pump receives the warm water after it's already chilled the intake temperature, and the pump itself is the last thing in our system that could actually put heat back into the fluid before it passes over to our Improved Racing heat exchanger. Because during the accident repair we mounted an absolutely giant radiator in the main bumper opening, there really wasn't any room to put a big single heat exchanger. So what we decided to do is run 2 heat exchangers in each of the side openings where normally the AC condensers would be. Now each of these cores is smaller than a standard heat exchanger you might see in the main front bumper opening, but because we have 2 of them run in sequence, I don't think we're going to have any problem with cooling. The warm air travels into the driver's side cooler first, where it's going to be chilled by the air coming through the bumper, then passes through our daisy chain line over to the passenger cooler for some additional cooling before it then travels back to the engine bay in our Mishimoto intercooler. Now because we're running the coolers at the front of the car, we end up with a lot of water in this system, which I think is only going to help to make it extremely efficient. Now I also told you guys earlier that I was going to give you a better look at Tim's handiwork with the exhaust on the NSX. Now, the centerpiece of the exhaust is this vibrant muffler, which has a 3.5-inch inlet and dual 3-inch outlets. Really a very clean way to split the single exhaust downpipe into the dual exhaust tips here at the back end of the car. The guys over at Artec have had great success with the 3.5-inch downpipe running off of the exhaust housing that we have on this turbo. We have extremely short piping and what should be excellent flow. The look of this exhaust came out absolutely fantastic. The only question is going to be, how it sounds. Now, I am waiting on a few small components before we can fire up the NSX for the first time, and for that reason, it feels like this is a really good stopping point for video number 1. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in video number 2, where we fire this thing up for the first time.